When choosing a place to live, we're encouraged to think about some very concrete things like taxes, affordability, crime, and traffic. I'm going to suggest to you it's much deeper than that. Videos abound on why to move to Nashville. It has no state income tax, lower property taxes. You can get a huge home versus what you had in California. And the Instagram moments dedicated to Nashville make it seem like the ideal. Collectively, my husband and I have moved over 20 times. We're used to the process. And in 2000, we were living in Jacksonville, Florida. We wanted to find our forever home. We knew Jacksonville wasn't it. So we chose Nashville after visiting a few places. But after a few years, we got to see what was going on behind that Instagram machine. I'm going to share with you the top 5 reasons we moved to Nashville and the top 5 reasons we left. What are the deal breakers for you when considering where you're going to move to? These times that we're in, well, we're all changing, and sometimes a physical move is just part of that process. In all of our moving around, I have come to discover that each state has its own personality. It can be evident in its birth chart if you know astrology. There's also this thing called astrocartography, which says, if you move to a certain place, different lines in your chart are triggered and you might have a different set of experiences. I haven't necessarily found that to be the deciding factor, but I do think that each state has its personality. Tennessee definitely has one. Reason number 5 of why we moved to Nashville and why we left. We were in Jacksonville. Jacksonville has 2 seasons, spring and summer. Jacksonville is flat. It's sprawling, and we didn't necessarily feel a sense of community because we weren't beachgoers, which a lot of people are. We decided that we wanted to move north. And we had that ability because I was no longer working in the corporate world. I was at home with my daughter. I had just left, and my husband was now consulting, so we could live anywhere. We looked around at a couple of different places and decided on Nashville. And it had the rolling hills, it had the 4 seasons, and it was just this growth. You could sense the growth in it back in 2000. You could sense that it wanted to be something more. We move into our house, and what I found when we first moved there, going to the grocery stores and stuff, is a lot of people, if you would talk to them, would ask you what church you went to. And I would answer honestly that I don't go to church. I got some interesting looks. It was like there's this veil in Nashville of acceptance, and church was a key part in that. My neighbor moves in a few months later, and she says, "Hey, come to church with me." Her 2 boys and my daughter would get together once in a while, right, and hang out. So we take our kids to church. We drive in our separate cars, and I meet at this church and take the kids down into this basement. I mean, it looked like a dungeon, right? But that's where the play area was for the kids. Now, I had never left my daughter with anyone. It was always just me, right? So I leave her for the first time, not sure how she's going to respond, and she leaves her boys, and we go upstairs. And there's this big, long conference table, and the church is kind of dark, but it's a big church. Nashville has big, big churches. And we're sitting around this table, and we're chatting, and we're talking, we're listening to all the people as they're talking, trying to get a vibe for what the room is, right? Now, this is a Beth Moore study. I have no idea who Beth Moore is. And they all sit down, and then they ask, who would like to lead in prayer? So I'm there, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I pray my way. Apparently there are rules in how you pray, and I didn't follow those rules. I just prayed in how I pray, and growing love. That's how I pray. Let's grow more of it. That was a baptizing for me into what Nashville was all about. I'm going through life once. I want to do it. I want to be real. I'll try not to insult anyone. I'm not that kind of a brass person, but I get real in conversations, and I'm very heartfelt. That's not necessarily Nashville's vibe. It's like a test. Do you fit into it? It isn't like what can it learn from you? It's we have our structure here and you need to fit into it. And if you don't, you will always be on the periphery. Now, that's not to say that those periphery groups don't exist in Nashville. They do, when I found them, the ones that go outside the church thing. But in Williamson County, where I was, and in other counties as well, that church thing is really strong. So Tennessee, as a state, isn't necessarily open and curious. It thinks it has itself defined and you need to fit in. It has these rigid delineations and these small pockets of progressive things. And I say progressive not as a political leaning, but progressive as in wanting to grow, wanting to be open and curious, wanting to listen with an open heart. Now, we left because of that, the environment of having to fit in. It doesn't want to change. You have to change. We also left because the seasons were changing, as it is in so much of the world. The summers were brutal. It's a humid heat that goes from June until October. Winters are really no longer. There was an ice storm this year. I happened to be there for it when I was visiting my daughter. But it's not snow like it used to be. We were also in Nashville for the 2010 flood. And the climate expenses, or the expenses due to climate change in Nashville, have quadrupled. I will say, in that 2010 flood, you ever want to see a community come together? That's Nashville. It has that in its heart. It wants to help others. But that's not necessarily the state of Tennessee and the surrounding counties of Nashville. And this is not about the people. When I am talking about this is not about the people. There's a deeper process going on underneath in Tennessee, and we'll talk about that in a bit. There were so many different things going on in Tennessee in these small little towns that you could go visit and you could experience humanity in these different pockets. There were parks and festivals run by small groups. And we had the Frist, which is not, honestly, a great museum, but it felt like it was the start of something big. It had Centennial Park. There was an arts festival there every year I used to take my kids to. I think it still exists. And these other small town festivals, the Tomato Festival in East Nashville and the Little Farmers Market, it made it feel like it had the potential to be a community. And again, in Nashville and surrounding areas, there are pockets like that. These festivals over the years became these corporate run things. And it wasn't about the small craftsperson coming in. It seemed like it had a different agenda. And it just lost its charm. And it wasn't because of the growth. You see, Tennessee struggles with being progressive and really listening to what its people wants and being very rigid. Kind of gets back to that idea of do you go to church or not? You know? So there's this tension there that you can't necessarily name, but when you live there for long enough, you see evidence of it on a daily basis, and it gets really frustrating. Another part that came into this was when it was time to send my kids to school. I wanted a school that was strong in the arts, that didn't do just babysitting, right? And I was learning enough about the public schools to find out that, number one, the teachers were underpaid, and that the arts weren't as strong anymore, and that there was a lot of babysitting going on instead of education. There was very rigid structure in education, this thing called the TCAP. So it wasn't an all-encompassing education. So I decided that we would, tighten the purse strings and we would send our kids to private schools, and we did for a while. But then we found out that the religion thing was playing pretty strong at this non-denominational school, so we took them out. Now, my kids tried private school at the time. My eldest was in high school then, and my youngest was in middle school. And so my eldest finished high school, and I got to learn about the high school, and this was one of the best high schools in Tennessee. Mind you, Tennessee does not rank high in education, in public education, and I don't know the private school numbers. But my daughter in middle school, I got a little bit more involved because of her age. And I could see it. The arts weren't really there. They had some. But there's a lot of like, if you can't learn this way, then you have a problem and you need to be fixed. That's not education to me. And respecting the different learning needs of all the different kids, I wanted my kids to have an education, to know about the world, and they weren't getting that in those schools. Education is so important. Teachers need to be paid CEO salaries. To understand the complexity of their job, personal rant here, I mean, these teachers are like the foundation of our society, along with the farmers who feed us. These jobs need to be paid more, but those teachers are struggling. They have to buy their own supplies. And where were our tax dollars going? Well, they weren't going to the public schools because we had all these fundraisers that we had to do to raise money for the public schools. In addition, Governor Lee had this voucher scheme idea going on. Okay, now you can tell how I feel about it. And giving our tax dollars to private schools. We're a community. We come together to learn. Everyone should have the right to learn so they can be on an equal playing field to advance themselves. Personal belief. That wasn't the case in Tennessee. In addition, book bans. Gino Bolso and his book bans. Yeah, it was time to leave Tennessee. Not because we had kids in school, but because we didn't want our tax dollars to contribute to that. The third reason why we came to and left Tennessee was about the vibrancy. You know, it had Vanderbilt University. It had other universities, Belmont as well. And it wanted to grow. It had ideas. It had dreams. But again, in Tennessee, you come up against this rigid thing. So you have this progressive nature, but you come up against this rigid thing. And it's all an undercurrent. You don't necessarily see it when you first move there. So Tennessee had this youthful charm to it. How can you tell a Tennessean from a newbie? Well, if you want to get in on the highway, or if you're at a stopway and you want to let someone in, your Tennesseans will let you in. And they will give you the thank you wave if you let them in. That's Tennessee. So when we had the influx after COVID, okay, you know, things change, but that did take its effect on the highway systems and in just getting around town. The driving got a whole lot different, but that's not why we left. That enthusiasm and vibrancy of the people of Tennessee and of Nashville and its other cities, I don't think that's lost. But what happened is, in Tennessee's urge to be progressive, it kind of made a deal with the devil. And the profit-hungry corporations came in and started tearing down the buildings and started changing the landscape. And the governance process in Tennessee thought, this is great. You know, people want to come be here. They want to stay here. You know, we're developing 12 South. We're developing Germantown. We're developing East Nashville is next. And people want to come be with us. And maybe we can change them. So the corporations have come in, and this vibrancy that used to be there, because we had all economic levels. We had these young ideas coming in. Well, as the corporations have come in, that's changed. You know, they've bought up Broadway, all the small businesses that used to be there. I used to go to this great fabric store down on 2nd Avenue, and all these little antique stores that it used to have. Those buildings have been torn down. Old homes that you used to be able to look at and appreciate their age and their architecture, they've been torn down. And now they have these rectangular structures, modern and contemporary. Okay, that's fine. But The corporations don't have a feel for the people. They have a feel for the profit. That's what they want. And everyone's heard about Nashville is like, what is it called, Nash Vegas now? And you get the bachelor parties and the bachelorette parties, and they come down and they hang out the trolleys and they vomit on your streets and they're drinking and they're carrying on. And you have all these bars and the restaurants downtown. I don't know how much people can eat and drink, but apparently they do so a lot. You've got a few of these corporate-owned now little stores. The bars are corporate-owned, so now it's like, you don't really have the honky-tonk. You just have people pretending to be honky-tonk, but they don't have the life lessons and the wisdom and the stories behind it that used to make up what Nashville is, that made Nashville diverse. The corporations have come in, and it's been gentrified. The diversity is pretty much lost because you can't afford to live in Nashville. You have to live in these high-rise structures. And by the way, the corporations have bought up, I think, 25% of the homes in Nashville. And I don't know what it is in the surrounding areas. I know they bought a huge swath of homes in Mount Juliet, and they rent them out and they jack up the prices. So it makes other people unable to afford to live in Nashville. And the Nashville Airbnb scene, oh, it's strong. They have like 12,000 plus Airbnbs in Nashville that are occupied maybe 45, 50% of the time. Otherwise, they're sitting there vacant. And we have a homeless population there that needs housing, and we're not spending money toward that. I still say we like we live in Nashville. I loved it at one time. My husband would say, it's toxic. So those Airbnbs, guess who they're owned by? 75% of them are owned by the corporations who also own the hotels. So the makeup of downtown has changed. I don't mind seeing the big buildings and stuff for condominiums and stuff, but they're vacant because the corporations own them and they're renting them out at prices that they can't afford, because if you don't know it, the minimum wage in Nashville is $7.50. We were one of those people that looked at taxes, cost of living and housing and traffic and things like that. We looked at that when we moved there. And the great thing about Nashville is it didn't have a state income tax. Now, having lived there, you pay for that in other ways that you don't think about. Same thing with your property taxes. I've already mentioned that Nashville has a homeless problem, right? And they would have encampments. These groups of people would try to find places to live because we weren't providing anything in Nashville that worked for the population that we had, because more people were becoming homeless because they couldn't afford the cost of living there, and they couldn't afford the apartments, and they're only being paid $7.50 an hour, and they're already working 2 or 3 jobs, and they still can't afford it. I know this because my daughter and her partner experienced that as well. They were both working 2 jobs, barely able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment. But in Nashville, Nolensville Road and Harding, I think this was prior to COVID, there would be this vet who would be in his wheelchair. He was a double amputee. On that corner with his flowers, waving to people as you would go by, and people would donate to him. Somewhere during COVID, I think it was 2022, I drove by that spot on the way to take my daughter to the airport. And this is Nashville. This is the people of Nashville. In that spot rested a sign. To say that the man had died. That little spot was filled with flowers from all the Nashvillians and all the Tennesseans who came to love that man. And what Nashville does in taking these communities and forcing them into these other areas after they've set up, instead of finding places for these people to live, instead of helping them. And there are people in Nashville who do great work for the homeless, who provide the driving buses with showers and things like that, who give free haircuts. But you would expect the state to hold some kind of accountability in helping its citizens. So now Nashville has, these sprawling mansions in Williamson County and other counties, and definitely on Franklin Road going into town. Sprawling mansions for a family of like 3 or 4. And I get it. Some people come here with this thing, this need to understand the power of money and to understand the boundaries of have enough, have more than enough, and how much is enough, right? So there's that whole range. So I honor their journey in life if they need to do that. But there's a climate impact on this. And given the amount of money that Nashville is spending on climate change related disasters and how much of our environment is impacted by these big homes and the water that they use to water their lawns and to heat and air condition and just in the land, the trees that they're taking down. I mean, there's like an accountability there, right? But Nashville and the governance process of it, no holds barred. Man, you do what you need to do. And, we're not going to meddle in your business. Well, but there's an accountability to more than just ourselves. So there's huge income disparity in Nashville, when I'm talking about the homelessness. You've got these huge homes, and then you have the homelessness situation, and that disparity gap is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's $30 to park in downtown Nashville now. We went to the, was it the Black History Music Museum, whatever it's called, great museum. Went there twice, absolutely loved it. $30 to park, that's ridiculous. And I think because of the income disparity, the crime rates in Nashville is the 3rd highest in violent crime per 100,000 people, right? So you see that bubbling up, but what do? Instead of trying to understand the problem and fix it differently like some other cities have, they put their foot down. They stomp and say, no, you have to do it this way. We're not changing. You have to change. We have to get rid of those people. They're not working hard enough and all that other stuff. So it's a very myopic view in Nashville. Rigid, not just in Nashville, but in Tennessee. Which leads me to the number one reason why we came to Nashville, but also why we left. Every state has a constitution and laws, and when we first moved there, Nashville felt like it cared for its people. The corporations have gotten more into it. What do they call them? I think the robber barons is what they call them. But they're moneyed interests. They're not focused on the people. Personal story. We're having a garage sale. For sale are some of my daughter's American Girl things. So people have come in and they've gone out, and it's toward the end of the garage sale, and some of the American Girl stuff hasn't sold. So I decide to just post it on Facebook Marketplace. The couple comes over, very excited to get this. They park at the end of the driveway. My husband and I walk out of the garage to bring them the things that they've purchased. He is packing. So packing a pistol, thing. And I'm like, oh my God, he has a gun. He could pull it on us. And really nice guy, right? I'm not here to tell you to own a gun or not. But the gun laws in Tennessee have a lot to do, I believe, with that high crime rate, violent crime rate. There are no age limits to speak of. There's no education required. There are no mental health checks. Guns are everywhere. You can do anything that you want with a gun. And in addition, the policing force there. I'm driving my daughter, who was like 14 at the time, to the barn so she can ride horses. I'm driving back. I'm in my exercise shorts. Hair's pulled back. Been sweating it out, whatever. And I stop at the local gas station in Nolensville. And I'm talking to this guy over there as I'm filling up because he has this bumper sticker on it. And we're both encouraging, we're both on the same political plane, I'll just say it that way. So we're talking about this because we're both interested in the same candidate. So talking about him. And I see this police car parked over there and the 2 guys going in and they're coming out and they're talking, at their car, police car. And so I'm talking to him, but I notice him. So anyway, the gas finished pumping, get in the car and hug the guy goodbye. That's sometimes Nashville. I hugged the guy goodbye, and I take off to go home. And then these two lights are behind me, and I'm like, what's that? I'm not going over the speed limit, whatever. So I pull in, and I get out of the car, and I'm talking to the guy. I'm like, okay, so what's up? I was just going down here. And he goes, are you on drugs? Have you been drinking, ma'am? I'm like, what? I'm a free spirit. I understand people who go into the police force may not be that way, on the nature of their work. They could have talked to me at the gas station to tell me that my tags were expired. I had no idea. But they didn't. They were sneaky. I've seen other things that I won't go into where it makes me question, who are the police looking out for? And that's not to say that Nashville's police force isn't doing a great job. I would never want their work. So thank you. If the one of you who is watching this happens to be from the Nashville police force. Nashville has recently, it's Tennessee. The governance process in Tennessee has changed quite a bit. It is a heavily gerrymandered state, so the people don't have a voice anymore. You think that Nashville is red, it's not, because if you go talk to people in Nashville and the surrounding counties, because I was involved in politics there, you will not find that it is red, as they describe it. It's heavily gerrymandered, among other things. So, taking away women's health care rights, the book bans, the Tennessee school vouchers that are being jammed down the throats of Tennesseans, how the monies are spent, the laws that are passed. It's a problem. Inside the people of Tennessee, there is this hope. There is this faith to find a good life, simple life. It doesn't need to be complicated. They want to realize their dreams. But the state of Tennessee, it's almost like the state, how it was born, the birth chart that it's carrying out, is to really want to make those people struggle for their power. It wants the power. Tennessee wants the power over the people. It has an agenda it thinks is best for Tennessee, and it can't let the people lead. It's afraid of what the people will do. It wants the quick fix. It wants the money. It wants the Instagram pictures. It wants to be the tourist destination stop. People of Tennessee be damned. So the politics, that was one of the reasons that we left Tennessee. I think on the whole, Tennessee as a state struggles with judgment. You can definitely see that in the politics. In the haves and the have-nots, and that disparity, income disparity that I've talked about. I think after about 6 years there, we were realizing it was no longer the state that we wanted to be in, but we were trying to change things, to be a part of the change movement, to be a part of that progressive nature of, here's the potential of Tennessee, because you can feel it in a lot of the people. The problems in why we left Tennessee, it wasn't about the people. Yes, we were bothered by people who may have been carrying guns and who held different political views, but we could give space to that. But you can't do that when the government is coming in and forcing you to behave within their laws, taking away my rights as a woman. I'm not of childbearing years, as you can tell, but I don't want to give my money to a state that's going to take away the rights of women or send women to their death because their pregnancy has issues. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't dismiss that it's important to generate money, but you got to take care of the people. So that's my diatribe on why we left Tennessee. Thank you for joining me.